Am I doing it?
I'm doing it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We talked about that.
I'm so sorry.
Come on, get with the program.
I'm trying. It's been a long day. Great.
Welcome to another Telltale Books podcast. Cut.
Cut. Edit. Boom.
Welcome to another
And I'm the one who needs to get with the program, Craig.
I just can't talk.
We need to have a nice blooper reel for this
right.
one.
If they're really good, I just leave them at the beginning and don't cut them off.
Yep.
Welcome to another Telltale Books video. I'm Greg.
And I'm Emily.
And we're actually at a relatively new bookstore in Manitowoc, Wisconsin.
Yay.
Called Black Heart Books.
It's a favorite spot for us right now. We really enjoy them.
Yeah, a new spot. We're getting to know it. We really like it, though.
Mm-hmm.
And excellent books, excellent owners. If you're in the Manitowoc area, definitely be sure to stop in.
Mm-hmm.
You don't happen to know the address here.
I don't. What's the address off the top of your head?
709 Buffalo Street.
709 Buffalo Street, Manitowoc, Wisconsin.
So yeah, we're having a fun little field trip today, and we're very excited to be here. They've been very gracious to let us use their space just to have a little change of scenery for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, they've been lovely at providing us with some of the work that we've been reviewing for you. So
And of course, we're dressed appropriately.
we're both dressed black. We blend in with this lovely couch. It's a cool space. Come see it. It's fun.
And so then we come to talk about science fiction.
Yes.
And we are talking about Slan by A.E. Van Vogt.
Yes.
We were going to talk about House of Leaves, but we're still reading.
We're still reading it, and then I got vertigo in the middle of reading it. So we had to put that for next month, but it will be coming down the line. Stay tuned for that.
Yeah, so Slan is a novel published serialized in 4 parts in the September through December Astounding Stories. There's a September issue. October actually has the cover illustration.
You have all the originals. That's awesome.
November, different piece for the cover, but it's in there. And the final piece appeared in the December issue, where the cover is for Old Man Mulligan, which is another great science fiction classic story. But this is arguably the first novel of the Golden Age.
Yeah.
And appropriately, it's by A.E. Van Vogt, who his Black Destroyer is usually considered what launched the Golden Age.
Mm-hmm.
And the Golden Age, of course, was a period of trying to lift science fiction up from its very amateurish, very Buck Rogers kind of beginnings and get more serious, especially about science. The science was still fictional, but the authors were encouraged by John W. Campbell Jr., the editor of the magazine, to make it closer to plausibility, if not completely plausible. Some of the authors would actually throw a lot of real science and math into the stories, like Robert Heinlein.
Mm-hmm.
Van Vogt got a little more fantastic with it and had a lot of pseudoscience, but he did it in a way that still seemed plausible.
Yes.
And seemed like a future that could happen.
Yes.
And Slan was his very first novel. What was this? His 6th published work.
Mm-hmm.
And Campbell, I really don't know. At a quick look up, I couldn't find any information if there ever were any more given this designation. But Slan was given the designation of the first Nova work.
Oh.
In Astounding.
That's
so
cool.
Campbell knew he had something different with Slan.
For sure.
And he called it out in the magazine as something new and something great.
Yeah.
And it became an instant hit. The fans loved it, and for many years, this novel was called by a lot of people the greatest science fiction novel ever.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So yeah, I can understand why. Definitely a top tale. Are you ready for the synopsis? Y'all ready? So basically, this is a very distant into the future, several thousand years, and in between those several thousand years, you ended up having a human who decided to try to mutate humans into the ideal human. And with that came this very alien-esque life form. And, of course, regular humans who were scared of them because these humans called Slan, it's called the Slans, could read minds. And of course, that's absolutely terrifying. And there had been some propaganda that had come out that said, oh, he was using machine to turn human babies into these aliens, and was basically trying to take over mankind.
Do you remember where the name Slan came from?
Yeah, Samuel Lan was
Yeah.
the name of the scientist, so they just called them Slans because it's Slan was
The guy
who came up with the process of turning them into the ideal humans. So then there was this mass hysteria, there was a war, and basically an entire genocide of these Slans. Of course, a few here and there ended up surviving and trying to integrate themselves into human society and live peacefully with them. But then there's Jami, who is the young son of a Slan. He himself is a Slan, and his father and mother both end up getting killed. His mother right at the beginning of the story. But his father was a great scientist and one of the smartest Slans to survive, and he found a new way to use atomic energy and to be able to use it in a more controlled way. So basically streamline the future of atomic energy and its potentialities and possibilities, using it for weaponry, using it for space travel, using it for all kinds of different applications. And it was Jami's job to stay alive and then return to his father's laboratory and then rebuild these things to try and find other Slans to try and make peace and stop this war between Slans and humans. That is the basic outline of the story. There's a lot more involved. A lot of politics, a lot of even internal racism, I would say, with the Slans, because he finds out later that there are Slans who do not have tendrils, which are the apparatus on their heads that helps them have read minds. There are tendril-less Slans who cannot read minds, but are extremely intelligent.
And have superhuman strength.
Yes, and have superhuman strength, a lot of capabilities. So basically, almost the perfect humans, but not quite. So Slans, but not quite to the same mutations as like Jami and his family were. So yeah, that's kind of where I want to stop because there's so many details. I really want to encourage people to read this because the devil is in the details, and it makes the story so much more. But the political espionage and all the stuff in it, it's really great. There's some space travel to Mars, lots of really fun adventures, lots of really interesting descriptions of science, and I really felt like this is a great story for people who enjoy both science fiction and fantasy, because you feel like you're reading a fantasy story. Yes, there's some pseudoscience in there that kind of makes it technically science fiction, and there's space travel, but it reads much more like a fantasy adventure. With more modern technology, which is really great. I think there's a lot of action, and I feel like it's a really great pace. This was a top tale for me, hands down.
Definitely.
Like, this was a joy to read. And a lot of, it was very emotional, too. Like, I found myself getting frustrated and having a lot of empathy with these characters. Like, this was a really, really great read. I happen to have it in this Slan and Slan Hunter, which was the second book, written, basically commissioned by Van Vogt by Kevin J. Anderson.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed the first half so much, I might just continue on to the second one just because I was very intrigued by this world. There's a lot of fun twists. There's a lot of information that is kind of, even though it's fast-paced, it's slowly revealed that there's a lot of history behind what's going on, and it gets very slowly tidbits revealed to you over time, which I felt was really well done. Because you kind of have this main character who doesn't really know the whole history because he's lived in a world of propaganda. Yeah. So I think that all of those things really add to the story. And like in the last 3 lines, there's like a great twist. You're just like, oh my gosh! Which is why I want to read more. So I was very thrilled with that. But yeah.
But, well, the last 3 lines being a twist, it's not like Slan Hunter is necessarily a necessary sequel. Slan was written as a standalone novel.
Yes.
And published in.
And it does well for that. You don't feel like it's an ultra cliffhanger. There's a lot of good closure, a lot of conclusion, a lot of setting the stage for what's to come and what's been planned out, that kind of thing. But because it was so fun, I just want more, and I'm glad there's more, so I want to read the rest just
Yeah,
because
go
there's
for it.
more.
And of course, I also have a paperback with a very nice Vincent DeFati cover. This was published in the early 1980s. Beautiful, beautiful
Yes.
illustration.
Yeah, so this was really a fantastic read.
Yeah, and you know, this isn't just a standard science fiction adventure. It brings in a lot of issues of the outsider in society, especially all the way back to the beginnings of science fiction fandom. You had people that would call them names and stuff because they weren't jocks, they weren't the popular people, they were usually the nerds, they were the brains, they were they were very much on the outside of everything. And so science fiction fans did group together because they were looking for like minds, because the rest of society was so much against them. And this novel very much reads like almost like a wish fulfillment fantasy for every science fiction fan to have something other than just being crapped on all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
To be taken seriously and be empowered in some way.
Yes. And there's a lot of social commentary in here, I felt, because it speaks, of course, very obviously to racism and international, I guess kind of almost to like that Cold War feeling as well, where everybody's just kind of on edge. There's all this propaganda. It talks a lot about the Red Scare, I feel it has a lot of commentary on. So this is just a really good book because it has these themes that have been a part of our history as Americans and as members of the human race in the world. And I felt like they really did a good job addressing it and addressing the confusion of like the fear of both sides that is legitimate. Like a lot of the not knowing and not understanding and the ignorance of knowledge. Not that they weren't pursuing the knowledge, but how much propaganda affected their knowledge was really interesting. But also just like the very different social dynamics as well. And I just felt like it just did such a great job of expressing all different points of view of either side, where there's just this natural suspicion of things, especially like when you're thinking Cold War and like the Red Scare and all that kind of stuff. There's just this natural suspicion that even your neighbor could be the enemy. And just everybody being so on their guard and so fearful because of all this propaganda. I just thought that was really well done in this story.
Right.
Of how that brainwashing over time happened.
And as far as its place in science fiction, I mean, you had H.G. Wells that was doing a lot of great stuff back in the 1890s. But then in between that, and especially in the magazines in the 20s and 30s, you mostly had a lot of very simple, very young-oriented adventure stuff like Edgar Rice Burroughs, or you had the more weird kind of adventure stuff of Abraham Merritt, a little more on the horror side, horror fantasy side. And science fiction itself had not really, aside from like the Lensman series and the Skylark series, you didn't have a lot other than simple space opera. Aliens coming to destroy the Earth, robots trying to destroy the Earth, mad scientists trying to destroy the Earth.
Yeah.
That was pretty much the standard plots you had. And then Slan came along. This was the first like golden age science fiction novel written. And it is very different from the kinds of novels that have been written in the 1930s, 1920s. It is more illiterate. It has better characterization.
Yes. Great world building.
Yeah, great world building. It's of its time, so I'm sure somebody could nitpick some things about it. But overall, this is still a very current story about anybody that's been marginalized, anybody that's on the outside of things, anybody that's
the ultimate outsider
treated
story.
bad. And you have this new race of people who are treated badly, and they fight back, and they find a way to change the world to be better.
Yep, and they're working towards that goal. even for the humans. Like, it's also very apparent that nobody really wants to harm the humans.
Yeah.
And one of the things I really like about this story, too, which is kind of different from sci-fi up to this point of when it was written, is that the aliens are man-made.
Mm-hmm.
It's right here on Earth. They're not really aliens, per se. They're just adapted.
They're modified
Yeah,
humans.
genetically the GMO human, essentially. They're genetically modified humans, and I think that was pretty original.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a lot of, like, they were always here, they used to be human, and they're not anymore kind of aliens, especially ones that end up going and living on Mars just to get some stinking peace and quiet for once. Kind of thing.
For quite a few years before 1940, eugenics was a really big issue.
Yes.
Which, of course, resulted in
I know, that was where my brain went
unfortunate
first when he's like,
periods
it's
of
trying to make the perfect human. I'm like,
Yeah.
no.
I mean, that kind of genetic modification to try and create an ideal human being, that's the worst of eugenics.
Yeah, and honestly, what they were doing in this story, too, was trying to jumpstart
the original
human,
scientist,
Yeah.
he was not doing good things.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
he did create these people, and these people arguably had a right to live, and they had something they could contribute to society.
Yes, and their goal was to be members of society. They weren't trying to be anything more or to overthrow everything until they became so marginalized that the only way they could make any changes for themselves, they realized, was to actually start getting involved in politics and sneaking their way into places of power. Because you can't make change without violence unless you get at the top, essentially. So I thought that was a really interesting kind of... So there is some political espionage and some mystery and thriller kind of stuff that goes in there. So I feel like this is a really versatile read.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people who would not typically approach science fiction would really enjoy this story nonetheless. So, yeah.
And I think this is kind of typical of the best Golden Age science fiction.
Yeah.
And I think if you explore the rest of what was being done, at least between 1940 and 45 in Astounding, you're going to find a lot more along this, not exactly the same as this, but along this vein as far as the style, as far as the approach to writing. You know, it's a new approach to science fiction that is definitely better than what was being done before.
And I love too, like a lot of people have concerns when they approach science fiction that female characters are not going to be well represented. I felt like this was so well done. The female characters had a lot of good representation. They were fully capable. They were strong, independent women. They were extremely smart and had a big part to play in this whole storyline. Even though the main character was male, the supporting cast had a lot of screen time, so to speak, in this story. So I feel like that was really well done. So as a feminist, I feel good about that. And having that representation be accurate was really cool too. So I just liked it a lot. It was a really good one.
So definite top tail.
Top tail.
We've had a couple of arguments recently about those things, but this is one where
unanimously,
And I kind of felt it was going to be the case. It
absolutely.
Just seemed like it would be your sort of story.
It is. It is very much my kind of story. So, yeah. Anything else you want to address for this one?
No, I think we've said it all. Definitely go out and find a copy and read it. I believe it's part of the Science Fiction Masterworks series by Gollancz, which is available on through places like Waterstones and Blackwell's, and even Amazon has a lot of them.
Yeah, so it's a very accessible book.
Yeah.
You'll be able to find it pretty well.
And
so
lots of collectible copies, too. Like I showed you the issues of Astounding. It also, its first hardcover publication was by Arkham House.
Oh, nice. Of course it was.
The interesting thing about, Arkham House was specialized more in like Lovecraft and
the cosmic horror kind of thing.
Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard, they published Ray Bradbury's first collection, which was just reprinted.
Nice.
I'm waiting for my copy.
Very good.
But the problem with early Arkham House and August Derleth is he liked to change things.
Yeah.
So a couple of years later, in 1951, Van Vogt revised it to what he wanted and published it with Doubleday.
Okay.
So That's the edition that you would have read. I don't know. I don't think it varies much from the Astounding appearance, but I think the Arkham House edition is going to be different.
Okay. Interesting.
Because Van Vogt felt it was different enough that he needed to fix it and,
and before he went
somebody
and
else.
moved forward. Yeah, no, I get that.
And so then after that, all printings of Slan will be based on that Doubleday edition.
Okay.
So, lots of good. I think Easton Press did a very nice leather-bound edition of it. We've yet to see it from people like Folio Society or Suntup. But it would be nice if they would do this, because this is that good of a book.
Yeah, it is. So.
And if they don't, hey, maybe someday we'll get the rights.
Yeah.
It
So
would be
check it
so
out.
Cool.
It's very accessible. Also, of course, approach your indie bookstores and your local bookstores first if you can. It's always good. Or your local library to see if they have copies of these. It is an accessible work, and of course, it has a lot of clout. So it's important to make sure you approach those guys. And I think that's all we've got to say about this one. You good?
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us, guys. Like and subscribe. We'll see you next time. Bye.